Tonight on the Buzz, Avid just released a new version of Avid Media Composer along with additional support for RED cameras. David Colantuoni is the Senior Director of Product Management at Avid and joins us to explain their latest release. Next, Philip Hodgetts, CEO of Intelligent Assistants, lives on the leading edge of technology. But for many of us, deciding whether to invest in new gear is a major gamble. Tonight, we're doing something different. Rather than talk about how cool all this new technology is, Philip and I will discuss how to decide whether and when it's time to buy new gear, because sometimes the best decision is to do nothing. Next, we all know we need to archive our projects for the long term, but how? Dan Montgomery is the president and CEO of Imagine Products, a company that specializes in media management and archiving software. Tonight, Dan shares his thoughts on the best way to preserve our media and projects for the long term. All this, plus a Buzz Flashback, Tech Talk, and Randi Altman's perspective on the news. The Buzz starts now.
Digital Production Buzz is brought to you by Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com and by ImagineProducts.com, the workflow experts.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
authoritative.
One show serves a worldwide network of media professionals.
Current.
Uniting industry experts.
Production.
Filmmakers.
Post-production.
And content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
And welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Mike Horton has the night off. The rush to announce new products, both software and hardware, continues in the run-up to NAB, creating an almost overwhelming wave of rapidly changing technology. This leads to a bigger issue that we want to explore tonight. How do we decide which new technology to buy? We don't have unlimited funds or unlimited time, so what should we buy? What should we ignore? And what are the implications of these decisions on ourselves, our clients, and the industry? I'll have more on this shortly. Also, please subscribe to our free weekly show newsletter at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Every issue, every week, gives you an inside look at the Buzz, quick links to all the different segments of the show, and curated articles of special interest to filmmakers. Best of all, every issue is free. I'll be back with David Colantuoni right after this. This is Randi Altman's Perspective. Randi Altman has been writing about our industry for more than 20 years. In fact, she's the editor-in-chief of her own website called postperspective.com. And as always, it's a great pleasure to say, hello, Randi, welcome back.
Hello, Larry.
Randi, I've been reading recently about the Hollywood Post Alliance, HPA, and their upcoming tech retreat next week. What's this all about, and are you going?
I am going, actually, and I will be very happy to leave this frozen tundra that I live in and head down to Palm Springs, Indian Wells, actually. So it's the HPA Tech Retreat, which is, so HPA is now sort of part of SMPTE. So this is the first tech retreat where that sort of partnership is going to be on display. So it'll be interesting to see if it's any different than years past, but based on what they have scheduled, it's going to be interesting. It's a great show. They've got breakfast roundtables. So you walk into the breakfast, you pick what topic you want to learn about that day. You sit at a table, and there's an expert, and there's a conversation that goes on. So it's kind of neat.
Well, what kind of subjects do they talk about there?
Everything. So HDR, big data, working in the cloud, post for OTT, which is big and new, virtual reality. So anything you could think of, anything you want to learn about, they've got a panel for it.
Well, thinking about new technology reminds me that last week Avid announced a new version of Media Composer. In fact, Avid's going to be on the show in just a couple minutes after you and I finish chatting. But there's also been some new announcements on cameras. What's happening there?
Yeah, it's chock full of announcements. Canon has a new DSLR that still and video. So they're targeting both. And then also AJA, which people hadn't thought of as a camera company until a couple of years ago. They introduced a small block camera. So that's going to have some use in media entertainment and also some, corporate and maybe security aspects as well. But then also Panasonic yesterday, they introduced a new version of the Vericam. So that's 4K cinema camera. That's out there. People were at the event yesterday, and they were talking it up pretty nicely. It's nice and light.
It's the Vericam LT, and one of the big advantages is it doesn't weigh nearly as much as a standard Vericam, so it's a lot easier to maneuver when you're in tight places.
Correct. Yeah, it's under 6 pounds.
So that makes it a lot for under 6 pounds. Can you imagine? Wow.
Yeah.
Thinking of new gear, though, Tangent announced some new hardware. What did Tangent talk about?
Well, Tangent, which is pretty well known for its colorist panels, was at IBC in September in Amsterdam talking about its low-cost offering called the Ripple. And they were showing it as a sort of a tech preview. And they got some pretty good feedback. They were initially hoping to ship it in March, but because of all the feedback they were getting, they decided to implement some of the wish lists of users that took a look at it. So they are probably shipping closer to the end of April. They'll be at NAB with the panel, and they're expecting the cost to be around $350. And they're targeting some part-time colorists, editors. So they're saying that it could sit on your desk next to your keyboard and your mouse and not get in the way.
That's very cool stuff. So when do you take off for HPA?
Tuesday morning.
Well, then we'll wish you a safe trip and give us a report from there next week, and we'll hear what the latest tech gossip is. Randy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Take care.
You can see Randi and read her work at postperspective.com. And Randi will be with us, as always, next week.
To read more from Randi Altman, visit postperspective.com. Still to come on The Buzz.
When you're working with media, one thing is essential. Your computer needs peak performance. However, when it comes to upgrading your Mac, there are so many different options to choose from that the process can be confusing. That's why Otherworld Computing carries the best upgrades that lets your computer performance and storage grow as your needs grow. Since 1988, OWC has become one of the most trusted names in quality hardware and comprehensive support to the worldwide computer industry. With an extensive online catalog of Mac, iPhone, and iPad enhancement products, as well as a dedicated team of knowledgeable experts providing first-rate tech support, OWC has everything you need to take your current system to the next level. Whether you need to maximize your system's memory, add blazing speed, or enhance reliability, look no further than the friendly experts at OWC. Learn more by visiting macsales.com today. That's macsales.com. Mike Horton may have the evening off, but we have a worthy replacement sitting in his chair. I'm delighted to introduce Philip Hodgetts, the CEO of Intelligent Assistants, who's going to join me as we start to chat. Philip, good to have you with us today.
It's great to be back in the studio, Larry.
It has changed many years.
Yes. It's a long way different from that first studio, but we don't go into that right now.
No, it's too depressing to think about. David Colantoni, hang on, I did this right in the promo. I'm going to do it right now. David Colantuoni is the Senior Director of Product Management at Avid. He leads product management and the design for all of Avid's professional video editing, storage, and broadcast products, including the Media Composer family, ISIS storage, and motion graphics and video servers, and Pro Tools, which is the industry standard for audio post. Hello, David. Welcome.
Hey there. How are you? Great to talk to you again.
Well, unfortunately, I screwed up your last name while you were listening, which is the worst possible time to screw it up. I apologize for that.
It was pretty close, actually. Colantoni.
Well, Colantoni?
Yes.
Well, I'll just drop 4 vowels. It'll be a whole lot easier.
If you meet somebody from old school Italy, they'll correct you.
Yes.
Some old timer, they'll make
we
sure
will,
you say it the correct way.
We will let me be corrected. David, virtually all of us have heard about Avid, so I want to get right into the new. Tell us about the new Media Composer.
Okay, great. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'd like to talk a little bit about Media Composer 8.5. It's certainly been quite a few years of resurgence for Media Composer. We've done a lot of different work on a whole slew of things to modernize the UI, and we introduced subscription and a whole lot of other things that that we've been working on. We actually spent a lot of time with editors. We created this Avid Customer Association a few years ago when Luis Hernandez Jr. joined the company. He wanted to really reach out and have our customers have a say in the products that we're making and the workflows and solutions that we're trying to solve. So we actually spent a lot of time. We have a council that helps us sort of choose the different features that we're trying to put into products. They give us a lot of feedback. So this release is actually the first release that we've actually worked on that was in direct concert with our Avid Customer Association Products and Solutions Council. So you'll see a lot of changes in the product that were centered around editorial. We did a thing like menu simplification. Menus, after 27 years of making Media Composer, engineers would put things in menus and they would not actually be logical. So, customers are telling us we just can't find anything. And so now we have our customers saying, I can't find anything because we moved it where they were so used to using it. But I've seen a bunch of folks saying, it's logical now. A thing that's associated with a bin is in the bin menu and things like that. So we actually spent a lot of time with folks doing that. We've gone through and added simple editing features. You would think, these things make a big difference in people's lives, being able to see a clip being dragged around in a timeline, for instance, seeing an outline. That just is such a small thing. But, folks are like, this can just improve my life a lot, make me edit faster, and that's what Media Composer is really all about. Adding tracks to a timeline. Some of these things have been in other editorial applications for a while, but, dragging clips and making a video track so that you can just drop it wherever without having to go to a preference or anything like that. Those are the kinds of things that these folks have been asking us.
David, one of the things that Philip and I are going to be talking about in the next segment is how soon we should adopt new technology. Now, this is a major release for Avid. It's a lot of new features. What's your opinion? Should everybody upgrade immediately, or should they wait, or should they see how the new version shakes out? What's your advice?
So that's a really good question. It depends on where you are in a project. So a lot of folks we don't recommend, and this is for pretty much any application. If you're in the middle of making a production, I'd suggest you wait until the end. Sometimes folks really have to wait. They're always editing. But if you have a little bit of downtime, make sure that you're not going to affect anything that could help you miss a deadline or anything like that. But in general, since we have subscription and everyone's on a support plan that includes upgrades now, everyone has access has access to Media Composer who's paid for it. So it's really personal. When you're ready for it, install it. This one has a lot of features that editors have been asking for, so we think people are going to upgrade more quickly. And the reviews have been really good on it.
But isn't it going to cause an issue for the larger plant where they might be needing to upgrade across a whole bunch of different productions? How do you advise those sort of people to roll out a major release like this?
Yeah, so that's, generally with Avid, a lot of times those customers are very big. And, we have, if you take a news organization, some news organizations have hundreds, thousands of Media Composers actually tied in with Interplay, tied in with ISIS storage, and a whole lot of other products. So they really have to wait and plan an upgrade for a year, believe it or not, before they would upgrade. So that's the extreme. The other part, to answer Philip's question, is really, it's a little bit, it's getting a lot easier to install Media Composer and a lot of other applications in the world. There's not this huge installer and you have to go find your dongle and update it and all that kind of stuff. It's just becoming a lot easier to do larger installations. We have things like floating license servers that allow people to push updates to every computer that might be on that particular server. We have things that allow for that. But yeah, I'd say wait for your production to go down or some downtime, and that's the time to upgrade.
There's a lot of new features that you put into this. You listed some of them already in the beginning of your interview, and I was on your website and exhausted 3 pens taking notes. But one that caught my eye was HDR, high dynamic range video. How is Avid supporting that? And the corollary is, how are we monitoring HDR video? Yeah,
so one of the things about this release is there's a whole bunch of project presets that allow you to set your project to a particular HDR setting. And depending on the type of setting you're using, for instance, the simple one is Dolby. They make their own monitor. So if you need to work in a Dolby HDR setting, there's output modules that allow you to view through something that can pass through an HDR setting, view it on a Dolby monitor, for instance. And that is something that a lot of folks have been asking us for. This is sort of the next generation of after resolutions. Now everyone's focusing on color, bit depth, and things like that. And of course, you've seen this at the last few NABs. This has been the big sort of talk. So we're allowing these types of settings now, and there's more of them. There's ACES, there's BBC, NHK, Sony has their own. There's many different types that are out there, and this one we tried to tackle a lot of the most popular ones. And it's really just another project setting, and you can output it to a monitor that supports it.
You talked about the fact that you've improved performance. The ability to drag clips is one thing that you've done, but you're also starting to implement RAM caching. What are the benefits, and what kind of RAM allocation do we need to run the new version of Media Composer? Are we looking at a hardware upgrade to get it to really work the way we want? Yeah,
it's a great question. So, what we're seeing with codec technology is, particularly with the new long GOP codecs from Panasonic and Sony, that they do require a lot of performance in the computer. So, we would say, I think a rule of thumb is a lot of computers come with a lot of RAM now. That's the good thing. But we would say, something around 16 gigs of RAM would allow you to get some RAM caching, but all the way up to 64. If you're in an editing situation, even on Pro Tools does RAM caching. It's just a good idea to have a lot of RAM available. And if you're on Media Composer for this particular upgrade, it can help your playback performance significantly, particularly if you're working with some of these modern codecs. So, if you have the ability to upgrade, it will definitely allow you to play back video streams much more easily.
Another thing I read in the release is that you've done more support for RED files. Thinking of codecs, what are you doing with RED?
Yeah, so, the RED folks have been great. And, last year we announced DNxHR, which is our new codec that is taking over for DNxHD. And obviously DNxHD supported HD resolutions, and DNxHR supports above HD resolutions. The RED folks have actually taken the codec and they're implementing it on their cameras, the weapon camera, Scholar W, Red Raven. So they are working on actually making that an in-camera codec, and that is a really good. And we've worked with a bunch of other partners in the industry, but Red has been really taking the lead on making sure that this camera works in their this codec works in their camera. This, of course, helps with a really efficient workflow. If you happen to be editing on Media Composer, it's a seamless workflow. You're capturing in that particular codec, and you can just ingest your media and start editing right away. So that's a nice that's a really nice feature of the Red camera, the new Red cameras that are coming out. So it's been great to work with them.
So does that imply that that codec supports high dynamic range, or the range of the image out of the Red camera, or is it we're just wrapping the Red codec and relying on that to handle that?
So it'll support. So DNxHR supports high dynamic range. So it'll also support that through the camera.
Right.
Which versions of the operating system for both Mac and Windows does the current new version of Media Composer support?
Probably the biggest request is it going to support Windows 10 and El Capitan, and it supports the latest Windows and Mac releases of those. So,
if you were to do a brief answer to this, because we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, what's the difference between Media Composer Cloud, and Media Composer First?
Okay. So Media Composer First is really a subset of Media Composer. It's a simplified version, a simplified user interface, and it's free. And we're still working on that, and you're going to hear more about that at NAB and throughout the rest of the year.
Excuse me, David, is Media Composer First announced or released?
Yeah, we announced it last year at IBC, but we haven't released it yet. We're still engineering it.
Okay.
And then Media Composer Cloud is actually a much more sophisticated editorial product that allows you to collaborate using Media Composer and Interplay. So it really is built for news gathering. So if you're on a site and you have a breaking news story, you could actually ingest media and interact with media that's way back at the home base at the newsroom, and cut together a story in the field. And so that cloud functionality is really the interactivity that you're looking for.
Would this be Avid's answer to Adobe Anywhere, where you have a server-based client operation, similar concept?
Yeah, a very similar concept. Yep, absolutely.
And what's necessary? Is cloud really for large organizations, or should smaller shops consider it?
So, we're seeing it does work with Interplay, and, we're seeing a lot of post-production houses interested in it because they want to decentralize their editorial away from a traditional post house. And so what that means is they could actually have editors anywhere and have all of their media back at the post house and hire out talent and still interact with their media and edit as though the experience is seamless. So more and more we're hearing post-production houses looking at it. It's in a bunch of news organizations throughout the world. It's been a very good product so far.
And what's the difference between the subscription version and the paid-for version?
So there's three different ways to look at purchasing Media Composer. You can subscribe to it annually and pay monthly. You can subscribe monthly. You can also buy a traditional perpetual license, which allows you to use the product forever. And if you want to continue to update that version, every year we'll come back and say, do you want to buy an upgrade package? And that lasts for another year, and every year you'll have to come back and renew. Last year we had about 5 or 6 different releases of Media Composer. This year we've already had one. It's only February. So if you're on a program, on a subscription or perpetual license with an upgrade program, you're actually getting a lot of updates, and you just continually get them and get new features. And it also comes along with technical support too. So if you need help, you can call Avid or contact us through the web.
Which gets me to the last question I've got for you today. Where can we go on the web to learn more about Avid and Media Composer?
Well, so you can easily just go to www.avid.com and you can find out everywhere. We're actually in the midst of revamping our website. You can take a look at, I would point you to the blog section, so you could actually just type in blogs and you could see and read about everything I talked about for Media Composer 8.5.
And David, thank you so much. David Colantoni?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, David Colantoni is the Senior Director of Product Management for Avid for their creative products. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Philip. See you soon.
Thanks, David.
Take care.
Still to come on the BuZZ.
Imagine Products has been specializing in workflow applications for over 25 years. They started with Executive Producer back in 1991, an all-in-one logging and offline editing tool. In 2006, ImageMine was used in the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, and ShotPut Pro was released. Today, there are more than 30,000 ShotPut Pro users worldwide. Pre-roll Post for Macintosh was released in 2012. This is an LTFS archiving application compatible with any LTO tape drive, as well as Sony's ODA. Pre-roll Post for Windows was released at the end of 2015. It's the only LTFS archiving application of its kind for less than $500. Imagine Products has 3 simple goals for its software: make it powerful, make it easy to use, and make it affordable. It's easy to see why Imagine Products has been successful for 25 years. Imagine what comes next. Visit imagineproducts.com to download a demo. Philip Hodgetts is the CEO of Intelligent Assistance and Lumberjack System. He's also involved with technology in virtually every area of digital production and post-production, and even better, he's a regular contributor to the BuZZ, which I'm very grateful for. Welcome back, Philip. Good to have you with us. Much is being written today about the speed of technology change. In fact, it seems that products today are being released faster, yet they're less developed. So this leads to a question I want to spend time thinking about. How do we decide when to invest in new technology?
It's the business of production. And the thing about business is that what you get to keep is the difference between what you earn and what you spend. And the more you spend on gear, the less you have left in your pocket. So my general philosophy is, I will spend money on gear when I absolutely have to spend money on gear, and not before that.
Yeah, but what determines what absolutely have to means? And there's a time where you're looking at, there's this new feature that I have to have. At what point are we, what's the tipping point?
Well, the tipping point is where you can make more money from having that feature than you could have without it. Or you can provide a service that your customers are demanding that you couldn't provide without having that feature available. So I think that's the primary tipping point. We're all, guys have a tendency to want to play with toys. What's the saying?
I've never heard that said before.
No, never. The only difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. Well, I think the wise thing is those people who have a partner that looks after their finances or helps advise them on when we should spend, should listen to the partner and spend when they approve it. When you can justify it to that person, you probably are about ready. If you can justify it to everyone else at the local ITVA meeting or whatever the modern equivalent to that is, then that's probably not the right time. Early on in the technology cycle, unless you're going to get a major benefit in the short term, early in the technology cycle is not a good place to buy.
Well, when should we be an early adopter? And when should we hold back? For most people, most of the time, hold back. But that said, there were people who jumped on the red bandwagon very, very early on because they could do things with those cameras at that price point that they could not do otherwise, and that made the pain of a very unfinished system, a very raw system, it made it worthwhile, even though for a while major productions needed to carry 2 red cameras so they could have a spare because inevitably one would be down at any given point in time. But the payback was a dynamic range that was unachievable at that price point. It was unachievable in that form factor beforehand, and that's probably the driver. When you can either push yourself into a whole new area that was never possible before, or whether you can make something more cost effectively than it was before. And I think they're the 2 criteria. Will this give me an edge that puts me in front of my competitors and I can justify it? It's not going to bet the business on it. Or is this going to provide a clear, faster workflow that I can rely on to get the job done faster? Again, faster jobs, same income means more money in the pocket, less time spent, more customers can be serviced, and so you can grow your business. And I really, to me, it comes around very much to the business argument, and it will be different for almost every business as to what the argument is.
I love gear. I mean, look, truthfully, if I'm to be absolutely truthful, I started asking my parents for a videotape recorder when I was 13, and trust me, not very many parents knew what that was at that time. And when those same indulgent parents many years later gave me the opportunity to go into business, I went in slam, right? I bought time-based correctors, I bought vision switches. I overcapitalized the heck out of that business and paid for it for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And so the next time I decided to make a big technology leap, I stayed behind the curve for a long time. And I think behind the curve is a very good business place to be. If you're behind the curve with the technology, I'm not saying buy 3/4-inch recorders, not that far behind the curve. But if you're just a little bit behind that leading edge, the leading edge is the bleeding edge. There's the cliche that you hear regularly. If you can stay far enough behind that other people prove the work technology, other people get the workflows, I'd say if you want a general rule of thumb, about the time the leaders, those leading edge people, are tied with it and moving on to the next thing, that's the time for you to buy it.
Well, there's a wild card in all of this, and those are clients.
Yes.
When should the client drive us to get new technology? And when should we show the client the new technology exists? And should we buy the gear in anticipation of getting business, or do we buy the gear because the business is there?
You buy the gear because the business is there. It would be my off-the-cuff response to that. I think it's dangerous listening to clients.
Well, I want to hear you say that again.
I think it's dangerous listening to clients in recommendations for technology, because most clients are not spending the time keeping up with technology. They don't necessarily know what's changed. Even in fairly significant workflows, people will tend to go back to what they did last time, even though last time was 4 or 5 years ago, and last time was going to digital lab. This time you just do it in the NLE that you've got, for example. There are times when you need to suggest to the client, there is a way that will do this that will save you money, and we can equip that for you, or we can provide that service for you. But it's really mostly, if you're listening to clients, they would still want 3/4-inch deliverables or 1-inch masters. This is not something that's driven by a technology savvy client in general. If a client is coming back and saying, we want to invest, we're going to spend $100,000 a production on 7 productions a year for the next 5 years on virtual reality, do you have the rig? Once the ink is dry on that contract, and you've checked their bona fides that they will have the money to back themselves up, then there's the time to invest in the best VR rig that you can get at the time. Not the most expensive, but the one that will give you the best short-term results, knowing that 6 months from now, the technology will evolve, and 6 months from now, the technology will evolve again. So sometimes making a less extreme investment in the short term to get into a space is a very good idea, because you can then dispose of that investment quickly and easily and get a quick payback on it. Honestly, if you can't get a payback on everything, on the investment within 6 to 12 months, perhaps that investment is not the right one for your business at that point in time.
But it's interesting to me, what I'm hearing you say is, in all cases, you need to look at where the cash is coming from. You're not looking at the creative benefits of having a particular piece of technology. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, because really, you can get a DSLR. Look, even apart from the audio aspect of both of those things, even most shoot and run and shoot cameras, the little still camera that my mum carries with her all the time.
The point and shoots?
Point and shoot. There's the word I was missing out. Thank you very much. Shoot and point and shoot. Hey, shoot first, ask questions later. But even that's capable of 1080 video. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. I think ridiculously we have something like 12 HD cameras in our apartment between 2 people. And now some of those are because I do small level production. None of those is a big investment. The most expensive camera in my arsenal, I think, is a $950 NEX7. And that's now coming up for 4-year-old camera. And it's performing exactly the way I did 4 years ago. An A7 would be very, very nice. I can lust after the low light performance of that and see some benefits for some of the things that I do. But I don't see a clear path for me to justify that expenditure to my partner, because this is not a revenue producing stream for us.
Well, how would you define when a product shifts from being leading edge to ready for prime time?
My general rule of thumb for societal shifts is, what are people talking about at the Super Bowl party? So when people are starting to send each other recipes by email, and your email had arrived in outside the tech space. I think when there are defined workflows for a particular type of technology, when all of the pieces are in place and you can go to a vendor and say, look, I want a complete workflow that starts with, this acquisition technology, but it's all going to be driven from what am I delivering at the end? And my general approach would be, what is the least amount of money that I can spend that will deliver the quality and storytelling capability that my client or I want?
But I'm hearing caution every step of the way.
I'm coming from a position of where I was not cautious and suffered from it, and so I'm probably overcompensating. No, look, there can be a place for this bold move, and I referenced the Red cameras earlier. And anybody who's been the first to go and do a major production, the people who were I'm just using as an example, the first editors that did a major motion picture on Final Cut Pro 10, they were able to leverage that to make a major jump in their career. To get into feature film editing at a studio level from television editing, and that's a way of leveraging that technology jump, and knowing full well if you are going to make that technology jump, you are going to pay for it somewhere, not in dollars, but you're going to pay for it in longer hours, in having to go and redo work that has been done once before because your conform issues are not working the way you want, conform is not working the way you want. If you're prepared to get some huge benefit out of it by being the first, then that's a really good reason to jump. If it lets you do something you could otherwise not do, in a very minor example, but without a 4K GoPro or camera of that size that is so non-intrusive, I couldn't do the Lunch with Philip and Greg series that we do, because it would just be too intrusive. Without the ability to have small recorders, that would be too intrusive. So when the technology allows you to do something you could not otherwise do, is a great place to do it. When the business case is strong there for that, and then it's the time to do it. Because you want to play with the new toys, no matter how you justify that to yourself, is not the right place to do it, and not the right time to do it. And as I said, technology is mature when all of the moving parts are in place, when the workflows are known, when you can hire people who know how to do that without having to go to the 5 specialists who are commanding a premium for their special knowledge.
Thinking at it from a personal level, how do we manage the stress of continual technology change and, worse, technology obsolescence? As you said, you buy new VR gear, 6 months it's obsolete. You buy a new drone, 6 months there's new drones out. That is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's one of the questions I ask at every lunch, because I'd like to know how people cope with that. And people have various means. Mine is I try and get this insight as to whether this is a technology that's going to fly. I was never enthusiastic about 3D. I didn't really think it was going to fly in television. 4K, obviously there are lots of advantages. As soon as I shoot a little bit of 4K for those advantages. Future proofing is another good reason why you might move forward in technology at this point, when the demand might not be there until some point in the future. But for a corporate presentation that's going to be come and gone, no matter how important that is to the production industry, having the latest 4K RED to shoot that is probably not going to be a great payback in the amount that you can get for having that in that context. So it's all about the context. And I'm one of these people that embrace change. I love change. I love jumping into the new. So I'm happy to put up with some of the teething pains that go with that. You have to choose where you're going to incur your pain. And if you want to incur that up front and jump into the new technology on the risk that it's actually not going to fly, ultimately, a lot of people got into 3D that have found that didn't really pay off in their investment. But don't go beyond the comfort point. If a particular piece of gear is making you feel, a choice is making you feel uncomfortable deep in the gut, I'd say don't do it, because there is an instinct, I think, that we all have that help us work out when is the right time to change and when is the right time not to change. And I like to leave the changes late. I like to get it first, but I advise people to leave it as late as possible. So I'm completely hypocritical. I'm a jump in and do it first, but I know what I'm doing. I'm prepared to put up with the pain of doing that. And I don't have paying clients that are looking over my shoulder saying, that's not the way you said it was going to be. And so if you're in that situation, then you really do have to keep all of those moving parts in mind and encourage clients into the right place when it's to their benefit or it's going to make it easier for you to produce for them. Otherwise, be as conservative as you possibly can.
And for people that want to keep track of these ideas and others, Philip, where can they go on the web?
PhilipHodges.com is where I do my sketchpad thinking, not as much as I once did. And of course, the IntelligentAssistance.com and LumberjackSystem.com sites are always available.
That's PhilipHodges.com, all one word, LumberjackSystem with no S.com, and IntelligentAssistance.com. Philip Hodges himself joining us in the studio. Philip, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Larry.
We'll be right back with Dan Montgomery from Imagine Systems right after this.
Still to come on The Buzz. Welcome to Tech Talk.
This is a typical shot where there is just all kinds of garbage in the shot, which is why we need to have a garbage mat. We need to get rid of it. Normally what I would do is I would apply the garbage mat first, although frankly it works in both directions. But to show you the problems that we've got and why the mask or mat becomes necessary, let's first apply the key. Grab the key or drag it on top of the clip. And let's take a look at our alpha channel here, our mat. That which is white, which is Andrew, is fully opaque. Parts of the green screen are pure black, and they'll key out perfectly. But look at where all this garbage is here. And look at down here, the light's falling off. We got folds in the fabric. It's not ideal. Before I add a mask, I want to clean up the key. So I select the key. First thing I'll do is go back to here, select sample color, and draw a rectangle near the face, but not so close that it's going to see hair or get skin. You want to be near the face because the part of the key that's the most important is the part near the face. If that looks good, people will forgive everything else. If the feet look perfect and the face does not, nobody's going to even notice the feet. Now we'll go back to our alpha channel here. So we've got a good key right up here, but we're losing it down at the bottom. Let's scroll farther down. If there are holes in your foreground, we can fill them in by grabbing fill holes. And I can tweak this a little bit. Spill level compensates for green edges. But the point that I go first is down here where it says Matte Tools. Shrink and expand allows me, by dragging this, allows me to notice what I've just done. I've gotten background to be more solid black. Enough black that I can now put a boundary around Andrew, which allows me to define the area of the key that I want to keep and which area of the key I don't want to keep. So let's switch back so we see the composite. And now we'll add another filter. It's inside the mask category, and it's called Draw Mask. Drop it on top of the clip. And I'm going to add a point right here, another one there, another one here. I'm drawing a boundary around Andrew. Now, if Andrew were moving, I'd have to keyframe this, and if I needed curves, I would control-click on one of these points, and I would turn it to smooth, and I would then have a curve that I could then shape by grabbing one of these Bezier control handles. But fortunately, Andrew is holding still, and I don't have to worry about keyframing. Keyframing for a mask is the same as keyframing with any other object inside Final Cut. You just have to set a position every time Andrew changes position. But what we've just done now is we've said the only part of the key that we care about is this. Everything else is transparent, and we see the background. So that which is from the top clip is inside the mask. Everything outside the mask is transparent, and we see the background behind it, and the key then shows up inside the mask. This is how we get rid of all problem footage inside any kind of a key. We draw this mask, this boundary around the object. That which is inside is keyed, that which is outside is transparent, and all the light stands and the garbage and the folded fabric, all that stuff just disappears, and we don't have to worry about it. We can even get carried away should we want to. Select Andrew. Let's twirl key or closed and go down to the transform setting. In fact, we'll just click transform down here and say, let's pull Andrew off to one side. This is the big benefit of having headroom and shooting both sides of the body. Even if the framing doesn't look good, I can now drag Andrew wherever I want him to be, except up, because clearly I've cut off his bottom. But I've got Andrew I can drag wherever I want and position him so I get the framing that I need that fits in with the background that I've got. We'll just click done. These are the basics. You apply the key, you adjust it so you get a solid foreground, which is white, solid background, which is black. Then use the transform controls to position it, tweak it if necessary with the matte, hide a mask. This is the stuff that we repeat over and over and over again. Dan Montgomery is the president and CEO of Imagine Products, Inc. He and his wife, Jane, founded Imagine Products back in 1991 with the concept of creating software to improve video production. From that initial dream has sprung ShotPut Pro, HD View, Proxy Mill, and Pre-Roll Post. Hello, Dan. Welcome.
Hi, Larry.
Dan, one of the big conundrums for media folks is trying to figure out how to archive their projects for the long term. How would you define the difference between making backups and making archives?
Well, back in the day, it was all about making copies of your analog tapes, right? And those were backups, right? An archive is really meant as something you're not going to touch very often. So a true archive, you have to have at least 2 copies offsite in different locations that are protected so that they can be accessed in an emergency. Whereas a backup is just simply another copy that you have locally probably, and you're making multiples of those perhaps. And I run into people that try to use LTO in a sense. What that is, they have one copy, they make one tape, and they think they're safe, but that's really not a good workflow. You want to at least have 2, and even if you have it on random access, you still want another emergency copy.
It seems that there's 3 big issues surrounding archiving. First, what hardware should we use? Second, what software should we use? And third, and I think it's the sleeper question, how do we play these files back in the future? So I want to start with the hardware question. What do you recommend, archiving on hard drives or archiving on tape?
Either LTO tape or Sony optical disc, something like that that's more permanent, that has a long shelf life, 20 to 30 years. Hard disks are like car batteries. They're only good for maybe 4 or 5 years.
Do you have a preference between LTO tape and the optical media that Sony's released?
Not really. I think in the long run, the LTO is probably cheaper and more widely adapted. But there's a lot of different companies involved in this, the manufacturing and also hardware that's out there. They'll be able to access it in the future. Whereas Sony is just Sony, but then again, it's Sony, so they're pretty pervasive in our industry.
So it sounds like you're not recommending hard drives for long-term storage.
Absolutely not.
How come?
Just not reliable. They're not going to be there for long term. Plus, the cost per gigabyte is prohibitive in the long run compared to something you can get on a tape drive. You can, nowadays LTO 7 is about $150 street value, $140 maybe for 6 terabytes. That's pretty cheap.
Since we can write directly to tape drives with the new LTFS technology, why do we even need archiving software?
Well, because everybody's time is valuable, right? And so we're all in a hurry and we want to get things done quickly and as efficiently as possible. And, you know, for just dropping a couple files onto tape, sure, use Finder, use Explorer, that'll be fine. But if you're talking about lots and lots of videos like most people are doing, you know, you're shooting a whole day's worth. Let's say you've got 6 terabytes a day that you're backing up at night. You want something that's going to do that quickly and efficiently and index it all, and also keep you from making mistakes. You know, a lot of our software like ShotPut and our pre-roll post backup software is all about catching the simple human errors and keeping you from doing silly things when you're tired, you've been shooting all day, and you're ready to go hit the hay, you know. You want to try and keep people out of trouble.
Well, tell me more about what pre-roll post does.
Well, we started with this a Mac version of that back about in 2012, I believe, is when we introduced that, and it's progressed a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, and just recently introduced the Windows version. So the Mac version is good for, like, you know, OS X 10.9, 10.10, 10.11, and the Windows version is good for Windows 10, 8, and 7. So we've got the last 3 operating systems covered on both sides. And the whole concept of those is simply, you know, make it real easy to drop your files in, see where it's going, and put it onto the tape and make an offline index. So on your local computer, you have, you know, the information of what's on that tape. And we try to gather what metadata we can from the files that you're putting on the tape and make them searchable, whether you have the tape stuck in the deck or not. So it's a true index versus, like you were saying, with a Finder copy or something, then you have to have the tape in the deck to look at it, whereas this is searching.
So the benefit to pre-roll post is it's automated. It allows you to work with more files than just a few, and it keeps a record of what it's done so you can figure out what files stored on what tape. Is that a true statement?
Pretty much, yeah.
Then what's the Windows version? Is it the same as Mac? It's just newer?
Well, we didn't have a Windows version earlier because, you know, Mac is pretty pervasive in our industry. Although we found that in Europe, a lot of people have Windows. You know, we saw that from our other applications, so we wanted to address that market. But the Windows version of pre-roll post is significantly different in that it's more of a single screen interface. So everything is in front of you. You can see on the left-hand column, you can see, you know, your tapes that are mounted, your hard disks that are mounted. You can drag and drop between them, you know, things like that. Versus the Mac version is more of a wizard where it's walking you through, okay, put your files here, drop them here, now get ready to back it up, now do this, do this, do this. So it's a little bit different interface. Might be a little intimidating to start with, but so far people catch on pretty quickly.
But there's lots of different archive utilities. Why would somebody pick pre-roll post?
Because it's inexpensive and it leverages off of the technology that we've been involved with for the last 10 years or better, as far as knowing how to back things up and to do it quickly and to do it securely and to make sure that copies match originals and all those sorts of things. Also, in LTO land, LTFS land, there's certain characters that you can't use for file names and folder names and things like that. And an application like this keeps you out of trouble and helps you make good backups.
Is it possible to get proxies automatically created of our media so we have a chance to see what they look like without having to waste time downloading them from the tape?
Sure. We do that with our Mac software. We have an application called Proxy Mill that can do that on the fly while you're making your tapes, or you can pre-process them ahead of time and make full-length, low-resolution proxies that would reside on your computer and also on the tape if you want.
One of the things I was struck with LTO is that each LTO generation, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, will read that generation and 2 generations back. It sounds like we can't just simply copy our archives to a tape and forget about them. We need to actively manage them so that every 5 or 10 years we upgrade them to whatever the current LTO spec is. Is that a true statement?
It's not so much the spec as it is the equipment, whether you still have that equipment that can read it or not. But, look what's happened. LTO 7 is 6 terabytes per tape versus just 2 generations ago, LTO 5 was about 1 terabyte, I think, or 600 meg, something like that. So it's a significant, increase in capacity. So one LTO 7 tape could hold, 10 of your old ones, So I think just like you saw with video over the years, a lot of times, you need a plan to move all those files forward to a newer generation of equipment if you want to continue to be able to access them. I want to point out one thing. Once upon a time, our company's 25 years old now, in January. And we were invited to do the archives for the Olympics in 2002 in Salt Lake. And so we were on site for 30 days. We did the whole thing. And what struck me was one of the managers there that was involved in that said, no 2 modern Olympics has ever been shot on the same format. So think about that. Every 4 years, it's something different. And that's a big challenge on how do, because they archive all that stuff in Switzerland and put it all, but having an index to it, something they could find, and how do you keep that going forward? That's always a challenge. That is a challenge. For people that want more information about you and your products, where can they go on the web? You can go to imagineproducts.com and find all the demos and prices and download things there. If you want to know more about LTO, you can go to lto.org. There's all sorts of resources there to help you understand how the whole thing works and going forward. And Dan, thanks for joining us today. Dan Montgomery is the co-founder and president of Imagine Products, Inc. And Dan, it's been fun visiting. Thank you very much. Thanks, Larry.
It's time for a BuZZ flashback. 5 years ago today.
For Yogi Bear, we actually had to write things down and make sure that not only is the actual animation and the transitions working, that logically you're going from this scene to the next. It's not all just a matter of putting in a cool transition and not sort of ignoring what the character is supposed to be really doing or communicating. So there's subtle things like that we do pay attention to.
This was a BuZZ flashback.
I find the discussion of finding the best balance between technology and business to be fascinating. Avid's thoughts on updating between projects and, more importantly, finding the time to plan your upgrades, not rushing into the latest version the instant it's released, but find when that update makes sense for you. And Philip's thoughts, I thought, were especially insightful on establishing a business case before investing in new technology. Don't be driven by all the marketing hype and the newest bells and whistles, but instead look for ways to make money on the technology you've got and ways to make money on the technology that you're going to be adding to your operation. It's also interesting listening to Dan Montgomery talking about how to protect our assets using technology, whether it's LTO tape or the Sony optical media, to be able to make sure that we've got access to it in the years to come. I want to thank our guests for this week, David Colantoni, the Senior Director of Product Management at Avid, Philip Hodgetts, the CEO of Intelligent Assistants, and Dan Montgomery, founder and CEO of Imagine Products. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it all is posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and available to you today, and sign up for our free weekly show newsletter. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Text transcripts are provided by Take One Transcription. Visit takeone.tv to learn how they can help you. Our supervising producer is Serena Catania. Our show producer is Debbie Price. Our production team is led by Megan Paulos, includes Ed Golia, Keegan Guy, James Miller, and Brianna Murphy. My name is Larry Jordan. Mike Horton will be back with us again next week when both of us will say thanks for joining us for the Digital Production Buzz.
The Digital Production Buzz was brought to you by Otherworld Computing, providing quality hardware solutions and extensive technical support to the worldwide computer industry since 1988. And by ImagineProducts.com, specializing in workflow applications for over 25 years.
If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To stay connected and receive updates from the Buzz, sign up for our free weekly newsletter now. Or you can learn more about us on our website. And thanks for watching the Digital Production Buzz.